KT Rolster Bullets for picking up that victory. Let's be fair, it was a slightly slower paced game. KTB got themselves a lead fairly early on and they didn't really give it up. Let's go back to picks and bans very quickly. We talked about LeBlanc, how important it was going to be for Kerp. He got his hands on that LeBlanc. The rest of the bans, Annie, Lees and Cassidy, taken away from KTB. And of course on the side of Millenium, they lost Eve, Ziggs and Trundle. I kind of feel like those were quite smart picks. It's ones that Millenium in particular have been using fairly well in the LCS.
Yeah, I think especially like the Lulu first pick, and then not contesting Renekton after that from KT Bullets was like really, really weird. I thought Renekton was like really, really high priority pick, and then they would like be all right with Millenium having the Lulu mid.
This probably ties into the Rise Renekton matchup like we talked a lot about earlier. Maybe they considered Rise a valid counter against Renekton and just didn't feel the need to rush him that early. I like that the Bullets ended up with Sivir. I mean, it's like the Korean AD carry, like champion of choice. At the same hand, I really like what they did. First pick, Lulu, solid pick. Like, it can go mid. Worst case, it can go support. I'm still not sold on Lulu top as much. But it's versatile, and people can't lock in LeBlanc. This is why the Bullets didn't pick LeBlanc, because Lulu does so well against LeBlanc, and that actually gave Millenium a chance to pick LeBlanc later in the drafting phase.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't necessarily work out for them too well. The second game in a row that we've seen that Lulu top, and the second time in a row we've seen a lane swap against that Lulu. Do you think it was a determining factor, or was it overall strategy anyway?
I think in the grand scheme of things, the lane swap was a factor in why KT Bullets ended up winning this game. I don't think the lane swap was as detrimental to the game as the last one, because Kevin played it pretty well. I mean, max range, didn't get caught, didn't get poked, respected the dive. When Elise went mid, he like went back under his tower. He lost his turret rather early, but that's to be expected within the matchup. So I feel Millenium played that lane-wise pretty well, but it still was definitely in the Bullets' favor.
I think Kevin, I think he should have tried to pick a tank instead of going for the Lulu top, because what Lulu was playing was like, Lulu is good against pretty much everything. So why not just put the Lulu mid, go with the comfort champions on Kevin? Like, he's really, really strong on the tanks. We haven't seen him on AP champions. There's no reason to swap it up if it's actually working for them.
We saw that in the top lane as well, the little hesitation. I mean, Aranea ended up finally getting his first or second gank off, and they wanted to dive to the next, and then suddenly they realized, like, do you want to go in? You can go in. We're both really squishy. Nobody wants to be that tank on the tower. So they needed Kevin to actually be a lot more bulky than he was.
And on top of that, actually, KT Bullets was ganking bottom lane at that time, where they actually forced Millenium away from the turret, and they had a successful gank with that, while they were wasting time on the top lane.
Now, that's the 1v3 that I think we were talking about later on. Now, that was later in the game. Let's go back to the first 1v3.
Yeah.
It gave KT Bullets a nice, strong advantage. We actually seen both mid laners roaming down to get involved in the thing. Millenium started it, KT Bullets finished it. What was your take on that first trade?
That was actually a really nice, like, elongated play throughout the game, because it showed like many factors of what the game actually is going to bring to us. Mid lane was rather passive. The only action that's going to happen is when those mid laners leave the lane and start roaming down. Kerp was the first one to arrive, but then we see the Bullets, you know, they just push in as far as they can, but they back off and then they switch on the target, you know. They're ready to make that switch, and we saw IG do that earlier today as well. You know, they back off and then they switch on that one target. Later in the fights, they would always switch on LeBlanc. Right there, they disengaged, let LeBlanc come. As soon as the two chains were down, they just jumped on her. Thresh sacrificed his life. Sure, Kerp got first blood, but it cost them all his cooldowns. Nidalee came in and they swept it 3 against 1. And from that point on, like, we saw the Bullets rotate so well. Group up mid 4-man, Renekton stays top. Just not much Millenium could do at that point.
Yeah, I think definitely another big factor is that they didn't punish the Nidalee pick at all with their LeBlanc. LeBlanc is supposed to punish the Nidalee, but actually we saw them trade fairly even in the trades. And I think that has something to do with LeBlanc maxing W all the time. I think LeBlanc versus Nidalee, you should max your Q, because Nidalee has to go close to actually like even take CS. Else he has to stay really far back and farm with spears. And in that case, you're not gonna use your W for actually farming anyway. Then you want her to lose as many creeps as possible with letting the minions kill themselves. And basically, Nidalee would lose like 1 or 2 CS every single time that happens. He maxed W and basically couldn't dive the Nidalee because of the barrier.
What do you think the thought process was for Kerp? Was that a safety thing? Was that cooldown? Was it farming? I mean, if in your mind aggression is the way to counter that Nidalee, what was going through Kerp's mind theoretically for this particular game?
So every single time you're playing LeBlanc, everybody will pretty much just straight up max W, because they're like, oh, it's low cooldown. It's almost the same burst. You have a lot more mobility doing that. But I think like if you need to like punish in Italy and you need to get as much burst as possible, it's extremely important you have the biggest burst. And I also think he built wrong with taking the Athene's Unholy Grail versus Nidalee compared to a Deathfire Grasp, because whenever Nidalee is farming, if she goes Cougar form, or if she just like try to farm with like constant heals and stuff, then you can punish her with Deathfire Grasping into the combo if you max Q, and it's extreme amount of damage.
That's a fair point. I don't think you're going to win that battle of attrition against the Nidalee necessarily. As to why he maxes W, a lot of Lubangs like it, push up and roam. They just Millenium got too far behind on their first roam that he could no longer push and roam anymore. At the same time, like W works well on a low cooldown against the Elise ganks. It just didn't really pay off, and as Froggen said, I think the DFG was very detrimental. Not building it definitely made them lackluster in the mid game.
Well, that does mean the next round of the battles will be between IG as well as